Well, as 2023 begins to wrap up, we have the chance a little bit to look back on the year, and certainly one of the storylines that developed was the price of ag land. That's something we've talked about for several years now. So joining us to discuss that is Randy Dickhut. He's a farmland analyst with Agricultural Economic Insights. Randy, it's good to see you and good to have somebody discuss this topic with us. You told me it was a little surprising as land values come in here in 2023. Why do you say that?
I think it is because as we entered 2023, the land market had made another bump up, strong prices, but we were looking at a challenge of higher input costs, lower, farm profits, and higher interest rates. And in the general economy, everybody thought that was going to slow the whole economy down, and therefore it would affect agriculture also and change the cap rate outlook for farmland. Well, it really didn't. Farmland stayed steady in most cases, went up higher. There probably weren't many new records, but there were still very strong prices at auctions. And what we've seen this fall, and gosh, over the summer too, are still strong bidding for land. Maybe not as many bidders, but they're still bidding on that as farmers have some left or cash stored up from the previous years, and when that farm comes up for sale, which is once in only every 3 or 4 generations, they're going to bid up to get it.
A lot of times we see the headlines come out when it comes to the record land price in this state or that state. As you look at that, factoring that in, but also just the broader picture as you laid out there, just steady increases that we saw in 2023, is that generally the theme?
Well, yeah, in 2023 we saw some increases in places, but they were smaller. They weren't to double digits, they were single digits, and some places was flat. For instance, some of the latest statistics from Iowa show just a very slight decline over the past quarter. But that's hard to tell. But I think the bidding has been strong here. We have seen some of those new records, but like North Dakota and stuff. But I think there's still interest in that long term. But I think we're going to come to the point those higher interest rates and expectations, lower commodity prices are going to be a challenge to maintaining that upward movement.
Certainly over the past several months, there's been an increased focus on who is buying land in the United States. A lot of congressional hearings at the national level, but also states are trying to put a special emphasis on that, in particular concerned about Chinese ownership. You bring up, though, a lot of times when you go to the local auctions, it's farmer versus farmer, trying to see who can buy the neighboring land. Is there any data you can track to see who's buying ag land, or is that just one of those things that's tough to nail down?
Well, not everybody keeps that true statistic, but if the sources I've seen in some different states, farmers buy 60 to 80% of what comes up for sale, especially at land auctions, because your investment funds, some of the institutional buyers typically don't buy in those situations because they're too competitive and the prices go higher. So farmers, your local investor, person in town that already owns some farms and wants to buy some more, will invest. And you've got outside investor individuals. And then in the states where they can, you do have institutional, the pension funds. Now there's some new vehicles where individuals who don't have to put up $3 million to buy a quarter section can put up a much smaller amount and buy a portion of a farm in an entity. So those are kind of 3 main ones. Your foreign ownership is really concentrated in timber, ranch land sometimes, energy markets and stuff. But it is a concern in places to watch and learn more about.
It's hard to believe we're going to start talking about 2023 in the rearview mirror, but as we do that, let's look forward a little bit to 2024. You kind of teed up the conversation. We're facing lower commodity prices than what we have experienced over the past year or two. You factor that in with the outside pressures of the market. What are you anticipating when it comes to ag land values?
I believe that those higher interest rates as loans roll over from the set rates, even though a lot of if a farmer investor has a mortgage on some farmland, they've locked in at some very low rates for a long time, and they're going to hold those, so it won't affect. But as we move on, there's going to be the need to borrow a little more funds because when they're paying, like I said, $3 million for a quarter section in parts of the country, that's a lot of money, and there'll be some more borrowed funds. So that higher interest rates will start to kick in, and the numbers don't look as good when you're with those higher interest rates and making payments. Cap rate expectations, do you want to earn 2% from your land, or gosh, I can invest it in a CD at 5% or some other market. So I think all that starts to pull back some of the demand on land. But the flip side is there's been a lower supply for sale. And so everybody's chasing that good farm that comes up for sale. And that's what's held it up. Will it continue will be the real question. But I think there's some real headwinds that, don't expect land values to drop, but I think they'll, again, stay steady, soften somewhat, and especially for lower quality in those places.